I'm Carla Renata, and I am your host for today's half hour with Director series on Zurawski versus Texas. On the screen with me, I have Director Producer Maisie Crow and Director Producer Abbie Perrault. Hi, ladies.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Cool. Maisie, would you mind giving our viewers a brief overview of the film?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The film follows 4 women, 3 plaintiffs in a lawsuit, and their fearless attorney. The women are 3 of ultimately 22 plaintiffs who sue the state of Texas over the abortion bans in post-Roe America. Now, all of these women experienced medical emergencies requiring abortions, and they were denied. Some had to leave the state. Some ended up having to carry to term and lay a child to rest, and some ended up going septic. So it really showcases some of the horrors that we're experiencing across the country, but it also shows some of the hope that there's women willing to stand up and fight back.
Cool. So having said that, let's take a look at the trailer.
Hi, Molly. I'd like to see if I could get in contact with you so that you're representing a group of women who is launching a suit against the state of Texas.
I unfortunately have a heartbreaking story.
Had an ectopic pregnancy, was denied medication, resulted in my tube rupturing.
Use my story, use my son's life in any way you can.
When you have doctors feeling like they can't provide medical care, it is a dangerous situation.
That ultrasound is on your belly and it's showing a pregnancy, and you think it's your pregnancy. But it is not your pregnancy, it is the state's pregnancy.
I was still pregnant when I spoke with Molly because this is not okay.
Somebody had to file the first suit. There are a lot of people depending on me and my fellow plaintiffs and this lawsuit.
Good morning, Your Honor. Molly Duane from the Center for Reproductive Rights for the Plaintiffs.
All right, let's do this.
The testimony you will hear will demonstrate that the chilling of necessary medical care is real and ongoing.
Miscarriage was inevitable, and my doctor, she couldn't intervene.
Is it your contention the baby's heart stopped prior to the induction of labor?
I don't know when her heart stopped.
They didn't have to do that.
It was the most traumatic experience of my life. No, I can't tell you exactly what minute her heart stopped.
They're just trying to stop the testimony.
What we're asking for in this lawsuit is the bare minimum human decency requires.
I just kept telling myself and my baby that I'm so sorry.
At any time did Attorney General Paxton tell you that you couldn't receive an abortion?
You know, I never thought to ask him.
These cases are showing people what happens when you ban abortion, and it's not necessarily what they thought.
Oh, God, we're never gonna have a baby.
To take my tubes out, it's a 2-week recovery. I'm not gonna have work or pay.
The stories are out there, and now they have to very publicly say, no, we are not on the side of pregnant women.
There's gonna be a ton of human suffering. But I do believe that we're gonna fix this in my lifetime.
Ooh, that trailer is so powerful. It's just as, if not as powerful as your film. And it, yeah, it gets me every time. Just to pick up where the trailer left off, do you think, ladies, that we are going to see this be fixed in our lifetime? And I'll ask Abbie to go first.
I do. I think going into this film, I wasn't so sure, but knowing that there's women out there like Molly and the women in this film who are fighting on whatever front they can, it gives me hope. Even as, you know, things are changing in this country, I think knowing that there's people out there fighting to find justice for women, it helps me hold out hope that we will get the care we need.
Cool. Maisie, do you want to add to that?
Sure. I agree with Abbie, and I think it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. And I think that we're entering into an era where things are likely going to get more difficult and more dangerous. And I think that we're going to have to figure out how we get through that time. And then we're going to have to look towards how we start clawing back these protections that we had as women in this country.
Maisie, I'm going to stay with you just for a second. How did your documentary, Jackson, inform your decision to join forces with Abbie, Molly, and Amanda Zurawski to make a film about a post-Roe landscape in America?
Jackson premiered in 2016 before the election. And at that time, I thought things were pretty terrible. Access was already very difficult for many women across the country. And once Trump was elected, it was clear it was going to become worse. Abbie had helped me with the impact campaign on Jackson, and we screened across the country in abortion clinics, with abortion funds, and with various organizations helping women and families access care. When Roe was overturned, Abbie and I knew that we wanted to make another film, and we had a strong relationship with the Center for Reproductive Rights. So we really leaned into that relationship and worked with them to understand what the new fight was going to be. And so the center pivoted towards representing patient plaintiffs. They had never done that in their history. They had always represented clinics and doctors. And so this was really a new era for them, and we wanted to see what that meant. They chose to do their first lawsuit in Texas, which is my home state and Abbie's home state. And so we were really drawn to the plaintiffs in that suit and to telling that story, because as women of reproductive age in this state, you know, it's our fight too.
Abbie, I think that Dr. Denard was such a lovely addition to balance out telling this story, because she's an actual physician who has gone through pregnancies and was treating women that had difficult pregnancies and or were able to take their pregnancies to term. When we see that clip of Dr. Denard giving birth to her child and holding her child on her breast, and you hear the voiceover say, ultrasound may show your pregnancy, but it's the state's pregnancy. How do you think having this new administration will shift things statewide and nationally, further affecting expecting mothers?
You know, I think it's hard to predict what this new administration will do, but what we know is that states have already made it difficult, if not impossible, for doctors to provide the standard of care to women. And you see that in Dr. Denard's story. She is, you know, having to see patients as an OBGYN and not provide the care that she knows is what's best for them. And she talks about how traumatic that is as a provider to have to say, I'm sorry, you have to go out of state. And then she herself having to go through that same experience and knowing firsthand just how, you know, how much doctors have their hands tied. And I think we will see that happening in states across the country. We already are. 25 million women live under these abortion bans in this country already. And it's a scary landscape to live in. And you see it in this film where women are being denied care and there are real consequences.
You know, when I watched this documentary, I'm reminded of how women in our country are always victim and blame shamed, right? You know, when a woman gets raped, it's her fault. If a woman gets pregnant, it's her fault. And I just feel like a documentary like this, showing it from so many different landscapes and viewpoints, is informative, it's educational. It should be in every school, in every healthcare facility, everywhere, in my opinion. I'm just saying, you guys did that. The moment in the film where the one plaintiff is at a burial with her child, and we see that little shoebox casket, but more importantly, during that moment, we see that priest kind of almost verbally attack her in a very judgmental, non-empathetic way. That moment floored me, because I was like, wow, she's going through enough and you are really gonna come at her like that? How did that moment resonate with you? Because you shot it.
Yeah, I think Abbie and I were both really surprised when that happened. We obviously were not expecting that. I think you even see it in the camera movements. I was holding the camera and I'm trying to just kind of refocus at that moment, because I was so floored that he would say that to Samantha as she was grieving. But to step back for a moment, what I think is so incredible about Samantha is we met her the night before that funeral, and we asked multiple times, are you comfortable being filmed? are you comfortable with us being at Halo's funeral? And she said, absolutely. The state of Texas made me birth Halo. And now I need the state of Texas and everyone else to understand what that means. They need to see me mourning. They need to see my family mourning, and they need to understand what and how Halo suffered. And throughout making this film, we revisited that conversation multiple times with Samantha, asking her, making sure she was still comfortable, because, you know, obviously she agreed in a moment of emotional vulnerability. And so we wanted to make sure that she still felt the same way, you know, 6 months later. And her decision never wavered. And I think that it's so incredibly powerful to have women demanding that people see and hear their story. And that's who Samantha is. And I think her story, and more largely to the point, she wants Halo to be remembered as a baby who had to come here against her mother's wishes, and she wants the world to understand how much Halo suffered and how much her family suffered in turn. And I think she's doing that, and she continues to travel with the film, to talk about her story, and to basically, to the point of that you just made with the priest, just kind of put him in his place. She's going to have the last word, and I think I have so much admiration for that.
I love that she had that last word on that situation. That was a very powerful moment, and it's the one moment in the film that just sears in my brain every time I think about it. And this is a great place to go to the next clip.
You know, we're such a Republican state, and I've always been Republican. I mean, like all my life, I've voted Republican. I will vote differently than I've ever voted in my life because of what happened to you. I will.
Yeah, I mean, it's become a non-starter for me.
Yep, me too.
I mean, admittedly, I didn't know that what you went through was possible.
I'm a changed person because of it. I am.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in you telling me how right to life you are if you think that what my daughter and granddaughter went through and risked is part of your philosophy. It didn't protect anybody. It only almost caused a second death, and I still believe my granddaughter suffered.
Piggybacking on where we left off, talking about Samantha and Halo, I also want to point out the moment with Samantha and her son, where her son is asking her, Mommy, why are you doing this? Aren't you hurting enough? Why are you doing this? And she very succinctly and very lovingly explains to her son that she wants to help other moms not go what she was going through. And to see her son have empathy for his mother in that moment, and yet understanding the pain that it has caused not only his mom, but their entire family, was very, very powerful. Were moments like that hard to be a fly on the wall for? I'll start with Abbie this time.
I love that moment. I think that one was not hard to be a fly on the wall for, because you just see her son, who is, you know, a teenager or a young teenager, understanding so succinctly, because Samantha so clearly points out that no woman should have to go through this. And he says, I feel supportive of that. And she's talking about wanting to be able to release her daughter to heaven sooner than later, is what she says. And I think it's just so clear that families are being impacted. It's women, it's women's bodies, but it's also children and partners who are suffering alongside them. And it's suffering that could be avoided. And so her son understands that. It's something even a child can understand, that there's needless suffering happening in Texas. And it's great to see a young man connect with that idea so easily.
I love that, because we don't see that many men involved in it from a very raw point of view. And the fact that Josh, Samantha's husband, and her son, and it just was so powerful. Maisie, did you want to weigh in on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I remember that moment happening very clearly, and I remember being struck by the fact that a young boy could understand that, yet seemingly half our country can't understand it. But to your larger point about being a fly on the wall, I mean, I think that's what Abbie and I love so much about documentary, is it allows us to lean into our journalism roots and really capture what's happening. And when we met Amanda for the first time, one of the things Amanda told us about what she felt was missing in the media coverage of her story was the long-term traumatic effects of being denied abortion care. And so to us, it became very important to include that. And we were a fly on the wall during some of the most challenging moments. And I think there's both power in that, but there's also a lot of vulnerability, both for the people we're filming, but also for ourselves, because we become really close with the people we're filming, and we're hurting alongside them. When Amanda found out that her surrogate did not get pregnant, we all cried that day. You know, we went into that moment really thinking that she was going to get good news, and that there was going to be a lot of hope. And so while we love doing this job, it's an emotional roller coaster.
It really was. That was another great moment. Thank you for pointing that out. What would you ladies say was the most surprising piece of information you learned regarding women's reproductive health and the trauma that is instilled upon all of the families that are involved?
I think going into it, I had no clue how long-lasting the effects of being denied care would be. From our previous work, we've worked with women in clinics getting access, being turned away from access, but this is the first time that I've really been around somebody long-term after being denied care, and just seeing the long-lasting traumatic effects and the reverberations that are so profound into their families and communities is definitely what took me by surprise, and was something that Amanda really led us to a better understanding of.
Thank you for answering that. Maisie, were there any men? I'm just curious to know, were there any men in very high-powered positions with definitive stances on this subject that you wanted to give a voice to? Why or why not?
When we made this film, is a very different approach from Jackson, which was about the last abortion clinic in Mississippi, but it also looked at the anti-abortion movement and the way that they worked. With Zurawski v. Texas, Abbie and I felt it was really important to tell this story through the eyes of those who were harmed by these laws. So that meant the women in this lawsuit and their families. We did not feel inclined to interview the state or any of their representatives, because we can see in the film and through each story what their opinions are and how these laws are shaping families' lives in Texas. And so we wanted to let what was happening in the courtroom be the voice of the state. We didn't really feel the need for further explanation. And if they had felt differently about how the laws were impacting women, then I think we would have seen a different outcome from the Supreme Court.
Did you get pushback from the state of Texas about bringing cameras into the courtroom for some of those proceedings to be filmed and documented?
So for the first court hearing that you see, where it's a single shot where we cut either to the judge or to the plaintiff's testimony, we ended up having to get an 8K camera because the judge ruled that we could have one camera in the courtroom. It could be on a tripod, it couldn't move, it couldn't pan. And we had to go to court to ask for permission to get that. And in doing so, the state of Texas pushed back, saying they didn't want us there. In fact, they didn't want us there because they wanted to protect the plaintiff's privacy. And we all know through both making the film and watching it that all of the plaintiffs in this case put their names. They did not go by Jane Doe. They put their real names, their identity, their stories in this suit because they wanted people to know that their stories are real. And so the state pushing back was just yet another way that they were trying to silence women in the state.
Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to find out, do we have an update on what's happening with Amanda and Molly at this point?
Yeah, Amanda has continued to speak out. She's like participant in the media as much as possible. She campaigned during the presidential election, going around the country telling her story, making sure people understand that this is happening in Texas, but it's also happening in states across the country and could come to even more states. So she continues to use her platform and her story at any moment she can because she's still in this fight. And the same with Molly. Molly is at the center. Every time we talk to her now, she's busy with another case and she's, they have, I think, 18 active lawsuits right now at the center. And so the fight continues on as many fronts as possible.
Oh, I would just add that Samantha and Austin are also continuing to speak publicly about their stories, doing as much press as possible, and just making sure that people understand what's happening in the state of Texas.
In the event or the case that someone has not had a chance to check out Zurawski versus Texas, is there one thing you ladies would like to tell them about the documentary that stands out for you and would make someone check it out? We'll start with Abbie first.
Yeah, I think, we are entering uncharted waters in this country of what could happen, what's to come. And I think in times like these, we need to look to the heroes. And I think the women in this film are so brave and vulnerable in a way that is so rare. And it definitely has given me hope and helps me have like a sigh of relief that there are people fighting, no matter what the circumstances are.
Maisie?
I think I would just add that after each screening, we get people saying, I had no idea. I thought I knew, but I had no idea. And then we get other people saying, this was an incredible, legal courtroom drama. Like I came into this thinking it was going to be homework, but it was a movie that I was glad I saw. And I felt like I was taken on a compelling narrative. And so, these women have opened up their homes and their lives, and they're completely vulnerable on screen. And to that, we're so grateful. But they also, in their vulnerability and their mission, give audiences across the country hope. And we've screened this film post-election and have had people say, I'm actually glad that I'm seeing this post-election, because if they can stand up and fight, then I can stand up and fight too.
I love Molly's motto of, I do not fear the storm, I am the storm. Do you ladies think that you are the actual storm, tornado, earthquake, whatever it is, in the fight for reproductive rights? And how do you see that storm moving forward from this moment?
I think that all of the plaintiffs in this lawsuit and all of the lawsuits that the center has filed in a post-Roe America are the storm. And I think Abbie and I have been lucky enough to get sucked up into that storm and be, working alongside them, doing what we know how to do, which is make movies and tell stories. And I think that we're going to see a movement of men, women, families, people who are just tired of being denied basic healthcare and bodily autonomy and the rights to make the decisions that matter to them and to their family. And so, I'm proud to stand alongside all of the people that are fighting to make reproductive freedom a reality.
Thank you, Abbie.
I completely agree with Maisie that we've been brought into this tornado. But it's a pleasure to stand alongside them and to use this film as a platform to tell these stories. It's an honor to see them at work. And it's something Molly always talks about. She's like, not everyone can be a lawyer. Don't go out and get a law degree. You don't have to do what I do. You have to work in your own sphere to make change where you are. And so it is about talking within your family. These conversations can be uncomfortable, but it is about just opening the conversation and, working within whatever sphere you're in to try and create a more just world.
These conversations are uncomfortable, but it's through uncomfortable conversations and moments that we grow and persevere, yeah? What can we do as viewers, as women, as men that are supportive of women's reproductive health? Where can we go to support? What can we do to help?
I think there's a couple of things that you can do. One, just to piggyback off of what Abbie said, have these conversations. Make sure that you're having them at your dinner table and like when you're out with friends. But secondly, if you're interested in learning more about the Center for Reproductive Rights, you can go to their website and learn about the new lawsuits that they're filing and the work that they're continuing to do.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the film, as I've said repeatedly during this conversation, and I think that brings us to the end of the conversation. I just want to take the time to thank you, Maisie and Abbie, for joining us today, and for everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us today for Half Hour With. Bye.
Thank you, Carla.
You're
Bye.
welcome.